Welcome back to Fast Market. I'm Alex Coffey alongside Kevin Hinks. It's time for our cash tag segment. Joining us here in studio is TD Ameritrade Network contributor Jenny Horn from LikeFolio.com. The co-founder Landon Swan is with us. Guys, the entire market is on sale a little bit here. We have markets under pressure, absolutely, but the social media space is maybe taking the brunt of this because they're down big.
Yeah, down 4. We're seeing Pinterest down 4.5%. And you mentioned before we went on air that Snapchat is down even lower. So getting absolutely crushed today. And I actually saw some of the reasoning behind this could be these rising bond yield, which is weighing on some of these very high growth, high valuation stocks. But that is all speculative right now as we're just sort of seeing a broader market sell off. But Pinterest specifically has sort of its own set of woes that I think is interesting and sort of separates it from some of its social media peers. Now, Pinterest has shed about 7% over the last month and over 30% in the last 3 months alone. So some of these fears I think are actually already priced in. But one of them being the fact that in its second quarter, it saw revenue jump about 125% year over year when it was facing relatively easy comps. Keep in mind, second quarter a year ago, we were, of course, in lockdown. And another thing is a lot of these marketers had significantly cut their spend on digital ads. Now, for this upcoming third quarter, which will be in about a month from now, they're facing much, much more difficult comps. They're expecting comparisons of about 58% from the third quarter of 2020. So that gives a lot of investors concern that they won't really be able to meet these comps after absolutely blowing past them in the second quarter. Now, another thing is they trade at a very high valuation. Their PE ratio is about 212, which is ridiculous, but some would argue that it's justified. I mean, revenue is growing fast for this name. Their business model offers operating leverage, and also analysts are expecting average earnings growth of about 50% annually over the next 5 years. So you could say that if you believe in the growth story of Pinterest, that maybe it's justified at this high level of valuation. But still, there is sort of this risk of a lack of growth. We saw actually their global monthly active users increased about 5% year over year in the first 27 days of July, which was the start of their third quarter. But we saw this in the same period, actually in the U.S. specifically, monthly active users fall 7%. So we are seeing a degree of maturation in the United States. Now, this could potentially be offset by their growth internationally, but there is always that concern that right now in the U.S., the market is as saturated as it could be, and there is that degree of slowed growth. If we're not able to see monthly active users grow, then I think that makes a less strong of a case for its high valuation. So that is sort of the buzz on social media today. People are saying that maybe right now this stock has run up too far, too fast, other than the last month, of course, when we've seen it fall. But really that at these levels of valuation, it's just not justifiable. It's not really competing with, say, some of its massive social media peers. But I actually found a tweet that I thought was a very good point, and I completely agree with it, says maybe we shouldn't be making the comparison of Pinterest to some of these names like Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter. So that brings me to our first tweet today, which says, the fundamental issue with Pinterest is that investors are comparing engagement to social media stocks like Snap and Twitter. It's not social media, it's a planning, sourcing, and shopping tool. People are on it daily. So what I saw that I liked is people were sort of calling it almost the creative search engine like a Google, but of course, for creatives. And our next tweeter sort of follows up on this and was actually in response to our first tweet, which says, I'm afraid this quarter is going to disappoint investors further. Pinterest is unlikely to compete with Snap at user grounds. The bull case for Pinterest depends on how well they execute with social commerce and how seamless shopping experience becomes for consumers over time. Long Pinterest. So I had to end on a positive note. And Landon, I have to say that I actually think it bodes well for Pinterest to be sort of separated from social media. As we know, we've seen recently with actually Facebook's Instagram, where they were going to put out Instagram for kids, received a ton of backlash over mental health issues. So I actually think Pinterest sort of stepping away from what is considered traditional social media makes its users a lot happier and just makes its perception a lot better.
Yeah, it's a good point. Excuse me. And if you actually look at happiness across all of these, it's an incredible difference. Most of the social media sites, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, they're all in the 50s, somewhere in the 50% of consumer happiness. And then you've got Pinterest in the mid 70s. It is just far and above a happier consumer base when it comes to using that platform. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way that they engage their users. it's such a unique model that can serve ads that are actually wanted and helpful. I mean, if you go on most sites, most apps, an ad is intrusive, it gets in your way, it stops you from doing what you want to do, and you got to wait till you can say click, skip the ads, or you got to wait. It's annoying, right? But Pinterest actually knows what you're interested in. They suggest things to you that, you're kind of on there looking for ideas anyway. It's a discovery platform, and they're saying, hey, this is something that you might be interested in. And more often than not, the user is interested in. To have a social media platform at, three-fourths happiness, 74% is extremely strong. So I do think that separating them from the pack is smart, and their revenue model is just completely different. So I agree with that point completely. It is concerning that their growth is slowing. I think there is a ton of saturation in the U.S. I think I saw a stat that 98% of users of a social media platform have more than one. I mean, everybody's using everything in the US, it's all over. And I think the international market is where these companies have to grow. So I think that the valuations are a little bit steep for me. I think it's a little bit ridiculous. The amount of growth that's priced in is extremely high. But you know that happiness is a very important metric with LikeFolio. We like to look at it, especially if there's one that's completely separated from the pack. So I like Pinterest here, but you gotta look at these other platforms. I mean, look at what TikTok's done. It reached 1 billion users in about half the time that Instagram took to reach 1 billion users. It is growing exponentially. So there's a lot of competition out there just for eyeballs in general. But I do think you make a good point with the happiness. I mean, this is just a huge, stark difference between this and the rest.
Landon, I think you and Jenny have you guys got your finger on exactly what is wrong with this discussion. Is Pinterest isn't like the others, right? I mean, I wouldn't even call this social media. Sure, it's an app that you go to and spend time with, but it doesn't have videos. It doesn't have discover ads. It doesn't have augmented reality. It doesn't have app games like a Snapchat does. It doesn't have, it's really like I looked at, when I was reading about it, it's stay-at-home activities, it's recipes, crafts, home improvement, family activities. None of that is really what's in line with things. And the bottom line is, though, for this company, Landon, and I just want to know your general thoughts. This is not so much of a question, correct me if I'm wrong, less time at home equals less time on Pinterest versus during the pandemic, it was more time at home, more time on Pinterest, right?
Sure, it's tough comps. Absolutely, it's all social media except for the ones that really hooked people. It's if you stayed at home, you're on social media more, and now they're competing for those eyeballs that now have the option to go out and live real life. And so I think that's the challenge for them. But you're right, as far as Pinterest goes, if you think about these other platforms like TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, you're on there to interact with other people, to post content, get likes, get that validation, whatever it may be. Pinterest, you're on there to find something. I would say you could actually compare Pinterest to a Google, just searching, right? So you're going on there, you're looking for something. There is social elements that aren't present on just a pure web search, but it is far and different away from the pack. Now, this chart is really interesting because it shows, again, we've shown this before, growth is to the right, happiness is to the upside. So you can see where Pinterest separates itself from the pack on happiness, but look at where TikTok is. This is unbelievable as far as how much they have grown over the last little bit. They are absolutely crushing the competition when it comes to growth, leaving everyone else behind. And I think that, a lot of it has to do with their algorithms. I mean, it is amazing. You get on there, and I've said this before, but you can get a new account to two different people with two different personalities. They both start. 10 minutes later, their feeds are completely different because TikTok figures out what they like, and all of a sudden you're engaged more. So I think that TikTok is the one to watch out for in this space. Facebook, while they do own 4 out of the top 5 social media platforms, which is absolutely incredible, between Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook Messenger, the only one they don't own in the top 5 is YouTube. While they do have that strength, I think a lot of it is driven by WhatsApp, and that's, it's being competed with by other platforms, and TikTok's taking a lot of eyeballs away from the group as a whole. But, I really think that the main competition for all of these is real life. And thankfully, we are getting out there. Things are reopening, and we can put our phones down a little bit more. They have hooked a lot of people, and the eyeballs are going to stay. But I think that, good for society if we get away from these apps a little bit. But for the companies, they're fighting to keep those eyeballs on them.
First of all, Landon, I could not agree more that real life is the competition. I hate social media. I just hate the concept of it. And so this is like, I think we all do need to step away from our phones. But I think what Pinterest sort of draws people into is that it's social media that's all about you. You don't see anyone else, really. It's curated all to your needs and your wants. But what Pinterest has done very well is they've tapped into this DIY home improvement trend, fitness. I look at different runs on Pinterest. So are they just, trending right now to be in sort of these very relevant topics? And has that brought about relevance to Pinterest? Because this isn't really something that I would go on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat for, because it's so curated to just me.
Right, exactly. And I think that Pinterest is wider than just home improvement. I think that that's been the thing that's been a little bit hot over the last year as people were stuck inside their houses. We saw, Home Depot, Lowe's, Wayfair, all those really accelerate because people wanted to renovate. And I think that at that time, that's what people look for on Pinterest. But I think that Pinterest is very flexible in how it can appeal to users, and whatever the trend may come in, they're going to get on there and look for things where they can spend their money. And again, that's why those ads are so useful. Is you're looking to spend your money, you're looking for new ideas, and Pinterest serves them up on a silver platter, and they're helpful, and Pinterest makes money at the same time. So very valuable there. And excuse me, I do agree with your point, Jenny. It just depends on what the current hot topic is. I think that as we move away from home renovation, there's likely to be a new phase that comes in, and I don't doubt that Pinterest will fill the gap.
Landon, Pinterest clearly a niche, but a niche that has brought a lot of value to people, and I think that we've covered that well. But from this conversation, I think it'd be easy to say, TikTok is disrupting the others. TikTok's disrupting Pinterest as well, because a lot of these same needs are getting met on TikTok. So TikTok really, what they're doing right now, every one of these companies we've talked about should be paying attention and finding a way to play defense, because 350% growth year over year is massive. And if you're not outside and you are going to be on your phone, or you're outside and you're on your phone, it looks like right now more people are using TikTok for more hours of the day than they are these other companies.
Yeah, you're right. And, I hate to admit it, but I'm one of the people, you can pick up TikTok and all of a sudden 10 or 15 or 20 minutes has gone by and you're just like, okay, what am I doing? I got to put this down. It is super addictive. It's super engaging. And I've actually got to the point where I just don't open it anymore, because it'll pull you in, it'll suck you in. Whereas the other ones, I don't really use many of the other platforms that much. I use Twitter a little bit, but the rest of them I don't really get involved with, because honestly, I think it just kind of lends yourself a little bit to the negative side of the world. People post their highlights and you compare your life to other people's highlights. I think overall social media, I'm getting off on a rant here. Let's get back to the stocks. Sorry. But, I could go on for hours about this. But you know what? I tell you what, if you're looking at, a company to invest in, I do like that Pinterest has set itself apart. I like that Facebook has 4 of the top 5, but honestly, I think that they're moving in the wrong direction. I think that they've got a huge lead, and it's getting chipped away at slowly over time. So for me, Pinterest, if you have to invest in one of these companies, Snapchat, I'm not a huge fan of. I think that they're really struggling ever since their redesign of their UI back a few years ago. Their happiness plunged. They've finally gotten it back, but now all their users are leaving Spotlight because they're moving on to higher paying platforms like Instagram and TikTok. So they have problems. I think that Facebook with Instagram is kind of the leader, but falling behind. If I had to invest, it'd be Pinterest.
All right, Landon, we'll leave it there. Good stuff as always. The co-founder of LikeFolio.com, Landon Swan.